You're watching Good on Paper, a bookish channel.
Hi guys!
Hey everyone!
Been a minute, but we're back again with another episode.
Yes, and I'm super excited for this episode because Rachel and I finally read the same book and we have not texted each other about it. We have not called each other about it. This is our first time actually talking about it together, so I'm just so excited.
I think it's going to be super interesting to hear each other's responses, like live, since we haven't talked about it yet. I'm really excited to see like how we both react. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, so the book, if you guys weren't aware, we read Married by War by Sara K.L. Wilson. And this is a novella, and it's from a multi-author series. And the series is, I think it's Arranged Marriages of the Fae.
Something
and
like that.
We'll put it down in the description below so that, you know, if our little talk intrigues you and you want to read it, if you haven't already, hopefully many of you have read it. We wanted this to be kind of a book club episode. But if you didn't get around to reading it, we'll put it down. And if we kind of spark your interest, you can go find it and read it for yourself. Because I don't know about you, Rachel, but here we go. We're getting into it. I love this book. This was like probably one of my top books of the year. Like that's how much I loved it. I was not expecting to love it. So I didn't know what to expect. But anyway, it just blew my mind.
Yeah.
So
especially with novellas, I never know what to expect because either they're like really good or they really don't hit for me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've heard it said about novellas is they're supposed to be the same kind of length of a movie. So if, you know, the author kind of knows that and fits a story that will fit in that space, I guess it works, but maybe sometimes it doesn't work. Although that could be opinion, because I was looking at reviews and there was a review that said I didn't really believe in the love story in such a short time frame, which was not an issue for me, but a lot of it is preference too. I mean, we can talk all day about how to do things and how not to do things, but sometimes it really is just reader preference.
Yeah.
You know,
100%.
So yeah.
Which brings me to my opinion of the book. I didn't love it. It wasn't like my top book of the year. It was like I enjoyed it. It was fine, but it was not my favorite book. Which I kind of like because I feel like people of the entire like group of people who read, there's so many varying preferences that I always find it so interesting that you and I have differing preferences on so many different things. I think it's fun to see like both sides of it. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, me too. Because I mean, we're both authors, we're the same age. We've talked about this before. We are always talking about this, but it still blows my mind how similar Rachel and I are in so many different ways. But like our reading taste is similar, but still like within the similarities. I mean, we both read fantasy, right? But like within that, we're so different. We both write fantasy. We're so different, like in those ways. I mean, yeah, it's just always so interesting. So that doesn't surprise me since it was something that I really loved.
Yeah.
It probably makes sense that it's not like your absolute favorite because we are so different in regards to our taste when it comes to fantasy. So.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm dying to know what did it for you with this book that you just loved so much?
Oh my gosh. I think just opening it and okay, there's like three things that started me off like, oh my gosh, I love this. Let me preface this with, so I actually read this book in like an hour because I was on an hour-long plane flight going to see my brother because he is not super far away. He's like 8 hours away from me in Salt Lake City. And my dad was visiting, and so he wasn't in town for very long. So normally we drive. I mean, it's 8 hours, whatever. But because he was visiting and he wasn't in town super long, we just flew up in the morning and then flew back in the evening. So it was like a day trip. So anyway, so I had an hour on the plane. So I know it took me an hour. So I started reading it, and instantly I was like captivated by Sir Oakensen, the hero, Sir Oakensen. He's a knight because he's a warrior. And if you guys have been around a while, you all know that I love the warrior heroes. Like Rachel and I are on the same page about this one.
Yes,
this is a similarity.
Yes.
Um, and just the language used
Mm.
it was very poetic, and it just kind of gave me like old um epic warrior tales
Mm.
vibes. I don't know. It's just the way it was written just felt like really weighty. I felt like I was reading like some kind of like ancient ballad kind
Yeah.
of a thing. And so I was already in love like on the very first page. Yeah. So what did you think about the beginning? Did it take you a while to get into, or did it hook you right away?
Um, like you're saying, like it sounded kind of like a ballad. It reminds me, not the story itself, but just the type of storytelling reminds me of like Beowulf, like that kind of thing, where it just feels like a legend told like from family member to family member kind of thing. Which I did like that aspect. I think it was grittier than I expected,
Mm.
because with like the, the trope of like the married and the fae and that kind of thing, it was a little bit grittier than I anticipated it to be. It wasn't like super violent, but just like the tone of it, like the despair in the story was a little bit more than
Mhm.
I anticipated. I liked him right off the bat because, like we said, we like the warrior guy. And I love like the dutiful, honorable man kind of thing. That's always a lovely trope. And I did like, and I don't know if it's because it's a novella, which I suppose that plays into it, that it doesn't take very long to drop you into the premise of the story of what's going on. It's like within what, like a chapter and a half or something, what we're here for, which I really liked that aspect too. So yeah, I didn't find it super hard to get into. No.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up the grittiness because
Mm,
you're right. Like that was not something I was expecting. Well, because it's a novella and it's a
yeah.
multi-author series. I was expecting a little more just like kind of fluffy,
Hmm.
really swoony romance. And not that it wasn't, but I guess it just had like sort of an old-timey tone to it.
Mm, yeah.
That also went into other aspects of the story. And I was expecting something a little more just like modern
Hmm.
language, modern style, because a
Hmm.
lot of I feel like fairy tale retellings, especially novellas, the
Yeah.
multi-author series are very like a little more contemporary, almost like a contemporary feel
Yeah.
within a fairy tale world. So that's what I was expecting. I was like,
Yeah. Same.
I'm gonna open it and breeze through it. And I still did breeze through it,
Hmm.
but not because it had that light sort of contemporary tone
Yeah.
like I was expecting.
Yeah.
And yeah, so the violence was a little heavier, but for me it wasn't horrible because it had um that like old ballad like
Mm,
Beowulf feel.
yeah.
So I didn't mind it as much because it felt very more symbolic and less just
Hmm.
like gory and gross
Yeah.
um
Yeah,
kind of thing.
definitely. I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So what did you think of our girl and the romance?
Well, this is probably where the book probably was like had less of a chance to win me over, just
Yeah.
because one of my least favorite tropes is star-crossed lovers. Like the whole Romeo and Juliet, we love each other but we can't be together thing.
Okay.
I
Mhm.
think it's a personality thing, honestly, because I am, and I laugh because I know people who know me would very much enthusiastically agree that I'm a very impulsive, impatient person. And like we went shopping for a car a few years ago, and the first place we went to, the first car I saw, I was like, "That's the car I want." And everyone's like, "Let's look around." And I'm like, "Nope, I want this car. I'm getting this car." I'm very decisive, and so whenever I read stories like this that have this trope of we want to be together but we can't because of
Mhm.
all of these reasons, I'm like in my in my brain I'm like screw the reasons, get married and then, deal with it tomorrow. Like
Yeah.
that's where my brain goes. I get impatient with it. I get annoyed because I'm like, gosh darn it, guys, you'll figure it out. There's got to be a door number 3. Just do your thing, get married, and then figure out all the problems tomorrow because they're still going to be there. Like that's how my brain works. So I have a hard time with that trope specifically. So like that's not anything against the book. I think it was very beautifully written and she's a great storyteller, but that trope in particular always gets to me because I just get really impatient with it.
Yeah. Well, you're
Yeah.
not that heroine in real life.
Yeah.
Like, you're the feisty, impulsive, passionate, like heroine. Like, that's just who you
Yeah.
are. And that's what I love about books is, you get like all these different personalities in books with
Mhm.
different characters, and sometimes you get the more like gutsy kind of like goes what after she wants kind of girl,
Yeah.
and sometimes you get the girl who's like
Mhm.
Iva, our
Yeah.
heroine in this
Mhm.
book. And I liked her because she reminded me a lot of old-fashioned heroines.
Mhm.
Almost like I'm trying to think of who the authors. Maybe possibly a little Georgette Heyer, who is Regency. That's a
Mhm.
Regency romance writer,
Yeah.
in case anybody's wondering. And then who's the other author? I can't remember her name, but she also wrote not Regencies, but romance
Mm.
novels back in the, I don't know, 70s. Oh, Betty Neals, I think. Betty Neals.
Mm.
So the girl kind of reminded me a lot of like that type. I mean, she
Yeah.
loves animals, and she's
Mhm.
like waif-like with the big eyes,
Mm.
and she's just very like cozy and homey like kind of
Mhm.
person. And she is not, yeah, she's not a go-getter. She
Yeah.
is more gentle and timid, and
Mhm.
like that's the kind of girl she is. And it's just not, I don't know if it's not something you see very much, because I do think there are people who write that, but I think that type of heroine combined with the way the language is written and the
Mhm.
fact that we have like this super like, traditional warrior
Yeah.
hero, it just really made me think of an older book.
Yeah.
And I love older books, so I really
Mhm.
appreciated that. And I feel like it was believable for me, like why he loved her, because she
Yeah, yeah.
like had her dogs, and she was very sweet and gentle. And I think for me, because he was a soldier, like
Mhm.
that made sense. It's like he wants
Yeah.
peace. He
Mhm.
wants this really quiet, like peaceful girl. So like I think it was, for me, it was the love story, which
Yeah.
again should not surprise anybody. This is of course my favorite kind of
Yeah.
like love story.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't mind star-crossed lovers as much, and I never thought about it, but that probably has to do with the fact that
Mm.
I don't mind timid heroines, and they're the
Yeah.
only kind of people that work in
Mm.
this
Yeah.
kind of trope. Like you have to have the
Yeah.
timid heroine, and then again, I think you probably need to have the super honor-bound hero,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
that's what keeps them apart. Is she is
Yes.
not a go-getter, and he's very like, I will do what's
Yeah.
right even at sacrificing my own feelings. Because
Mhm.
if you don't have those two in the
Yeah.
romance, I
Mhm.
don't know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
don't have those two hero and that heroine in the
Mm.
romance, like I don't know that it works. I'm trying to think of another type of hero and heroine it would work with, but probably wouldn't make a whole
Yeah.
lot of sense with somebody
No, because
else.
I mean the whole reason they're star-crossed and they don't do what I would do, which is like just get married and deal with it, is because of those character traits where he's like, no, this is the right thing. And I think too, I'm I've grown a lot over the years, but I'm naturally a more selfish person. Like I have to remind myself to be selfless. It's like a practice trait that I've learned to be better at. I'm naturally empathetic, but to like actually sacrifice my own happiness for other people, like that's something I've had to like work on versus like my mom comes so naturally to her. She has a hard time being selfish. And I'm like, no, you kind of need to be selfish in this situation. So I think that too is I think it's the identifying with the character thing that makes it hard for me because the whole selfless, I'm going to give up my happiness and I'm going to suffer for everybody else. I'm like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
that's why I have a hard time. But I will agree. She fits so well in this world and in this story. The character does. Like she does. She fits very well into it.
yeah. And as you're bringing this stuff up, it makes me realize that, see, it's really interesting to hear your viewpoint, because I love this story. I didn't really
Mhm.
think about what went into it to make it work. But another thing
Yeah.
that Sarah did really well is she set up the world. I mean,
Mm,
Halder has been through so much and lost so
yeah.
much. And then even Iva, I mean, she hasn't like been sacrificing her life, but she's living in this old castle that's like
Mhm.
seen so many better days. I mean, their nation has really been wrecked
Mhm.
by this war. They live in miserable circumstances. So it makes more sense that they would give up their love to save their
Mhm.
country, because they know like how bad it is. Like had
Yeah.
she been living in perfectly normal circumstances, I don't know that it would have been, she would have cared enough to go
Mm,
marry the person she was supposed to marry, the Fae King there,
Yeah.
you know, had she not been living in this miserable circumstances, everybody around her is miserable. And she
Yeah.
knows like this is the only way to make it better.
Mm.
And even if she and Helder got married, like they would still all be miserable and it would, you know, they'd be poor
Yeah.
and fighting this war. So I think that also
Mm.
makes it more believable because I do think I agree with you. Yeah, maybe some people have a little less harder, less difficult of a time with being selfish, but I think most people, I think we're all pretty selfish deep down.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like you have to really set up the stakes
Mm.
well so that we believe that people will actually
Yeah.
go against their selfish
Yeah.
instincts, you
Yeah.
know.
I think too, I
Yeah.
could have probably been like more rooting for them and like excited for the story if the Elf King didn't seem so horrible. Like if he just seemed like a cavalier kind of jerk-ish, but like, oh, he could totally be redeemed with a soft woman. Like I would have been more like I would have been more along the lines of yes, I want Haldir and her to be together, but at the same time, like her sacrificing herself would have made more sense to me. But knowing that like maybe she's going to go to this man who's super abusive and horrible, like then I'm like, well, no, I don't want her to. So I feel like if I had been a little bit more, uh, if there'd been a little bit more like possibility that maybe her future could have been not bleak if she sacrificed
Mhm.
herself, I would have been less like upset about it, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, because then it would have been, you would have thought, okay, well, now I was thinking, okay, you know, this is what I want, but maybe this way wouldn't be so bad. So I'm going to
Yeah.
go with it because I know it's the right thing to do. But she knew it
Yeah.
was going to be awful. I mean, she was
Yeah.
being sold off.
Yeah.
Like, and that gave this book a really historical feel to me.
Mm-hmm.
That was the other aspect. I mean, it seems like we're in like the deep, dark Middle Ages.
Yeah.
And you know, you're getting sold off to some
Mm-hmm.
absolutely cruel warlord who you know is not going to be a good husband.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I think you know, like more common is in books, in fantasy books today, is you have the trope of like it's the bad guy, but you know he's really like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, he's
Yeah.
romantic and he's not as bad as he seems, you know, like the
Yeah.
cruel prince. And
It's like he wears a
trying to
veneer,
think.
but it's not real.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like he seems bad, but because it makes him
Mm-hmm.
glamorous, but he's not actually bad.
Yeah.
But no, this was a terrifying Fey King. Like this is
Yeah.
not your super attractive
Yeah.
Akatar kind of Fae. Like this is a
Mm-hmm.
monster, and she's
Yeah.
getting married to him. Yeah, so um yeah, so she really did need to be like that timid personality who was not gonna get out of that. She's like, okay, I'm the lamb led to slaughter, and that's what I'm supposed to do.
Mhm. Oh, you know the part that really did make me upset is
Oh
the
my
dog.
gosh, I think I know what you're gonna say.
The dog. I just
Yes, I
can't.
was about to say, what
Listen,
did you think of that?
this is the reason that I'm not generally a fan of Goose Girl retellings because of the horse. Like there are some that don't do that, and I like those. But when they do that to the horse, I get really, really angry. So then for that to happen to the dog, I was so angry. I was like, "Are you serious?" I was so mad. So mad.
No, me too. Like that part, like really, it upset me so much because I saw it coming,
Yeah.
but I was like, well, maybe it won't actually happen.
Mhm.
But like when he got separated from his dog, like that just broke me. No,
Mhm.
and I don't think I realized it was a Goose Girl retelling, or I don't know that it's, or it has aspects of it. Maybe it's not supposed to be a strict one, but I noticed it when the lady who traveled with her was trying to switch things. I was like, "Oh,
Oh,
Goose
yeah,
Girl," and
yeah.
I wasn't aware of that going in. You know, I was
Yeah.
just reading
I
it, and
didn't
I
catch
had no
that till
idea it was supposed to be Goose Girl
yeah.
until the woman she was traveling with tried to switch with her, and I was like, "Oh yes," because I love the Goose
Yeah.
Girl, and so
Yeah.
I was super excited. But so the dog was probably like more a parallel for Falada, the
Mhm.
horse, which I didn't know. And to see it, this is great. We get to talk
Yeah.
about it because I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah.
Like,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, that was heartbreaking because I
Mhm.
mean, from the very first chapter, you know how important. I mean, his dog is
Yeah.
in the first on the first page, like in the first
Mhm.
paragraph, I think.
Yeah.
And she is just always with him and she has such a personality, and you really fall in love with the dog. You know, because I mean, dogs are always in books, like,
Yeah.
you're gonna love them, but I think in this book the dog was done really well. Like, just all the personality she had, and like such a big role she had, like, by his side, that that was that was not my favorite part of the book.
No.
I was so mad. I wanted to stab that awful lady and that horrible guy. Oh my goodness. Like,
see, and this is
I was
why
like, just stab them, get your dog back.
Yes.
Stop
I'm like
being so
sitting there like
honorable.
putting myself in the story, and I'm like, this is what I would do, and ain't nobody taking my dog.
Yeah. I know.
Oh yeah. That was a hard part.
Yeah. So what did you think of the bad, well, because the Fae King is like the bad guy, but like the real bad guy we all know is Lady, whatever her name is. She's so forgettable. Like, nobody likes her. Yeah. What did you think of her?
I loved the, like, I don't know if you call it like the symmetry or what of her ending up in that place at the end of the book. I was like, that fits. That feels perfect to me. I like this. This feels like the exact, like, repercussions that should have happened. I liked that a lot. She was definitely a good villain.
She was. But you just remind me, there's that prophecy part that was at the beginning of the book, which I thought was cool because you don't really know what it means. And so you always have that like mystery that you like, you think you know what it means in the middle, and you're like, wait, no, we don't. And then.
And I think that too was part of why I was so upset that she was just willingly being led to the slaughter and is like, oh, I'm falling in love with you, but I'm not going to be with you because I could save the entire nation. Because I'm like, you're trusting the words of a fae you don't know. Nobody has like verified this. No like scholars have researched it or anything, but you're just going to go do this hoping it works. That I was like, what? Why?
Yeah, this random prophecy. And where did that prophecy come from? That was the Fae prophecy, right?
Yeah.
So the Fae, so your enemy just shows up and it's like, yeah, we have this prophecy and this will stop, this from happening. And then you're like, oh, well, we've never heard of this prophecy before. But yeah, I think that's probably why the book was so gritty. Because like, it had to be that they were that desperate. They're like, sure, this prophecy, yeah, sounds great. What's one girl gonna do? Like, we'll just sacrifice her.
Well, I mean, when you think about it, her dad doesn't care, so it's not really any skin off his nose.
That's true, because he's not, because she's the illegitimate daughter, and he's never known her.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't know her at all, and he doesn't really care.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that twist at the end, though, we probably should have prefaced this that there is going to be major spoilers. I mean, it's a book club chat, so
maybe I'll put a voiceover at the beginning of this saying, warning, major spoilers ahead.
Yeah. Maybe I'll make a little slide with the book and I'll just be like, and you put the voiceover over it. That way everybody knows, like, we all read this book. That's the point of this episode.
Exactly.
But anyway, so what did you think of the twist at the end? Because remember, the Fae were like, there's something going on here and they didn't know what they're talking about. And then we find out that they actually like grow in size or something and are able to, or they turn into fire and they're able to hack down the Fae. And that's what the Fae were trying to stop with the prophecy. But the humans like weren't even aware.
Yeah. It was a very like climactic ending there.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
And then I kind of, because it was, you could see, knowing, going back to the beginning, that was happening. Because like the way she was talking about them advancing. But I think the final scene of battle, right before we find that out, there was something in the way it was worded where it was like, and he hacked the Fae guy down on his horse or something like that. I forget what it was exactly. But I remember I was thinking, wait a minute. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he's on foot. Like, how is this working? And I didn't have that thought until like right before that happened. So I wonder if it was, she made it like more obvious to set it up.
Yeah.
Because then right after that you find out and you're like, oh, that makes so much more sense. Like, he doesn't know And maybe there was something about like his sensation, what he feels like when he's like
Yeah.
advancing in battle, that I was like, oh, that's him turning
Yeah.
into like this monster thing that can attack the Fae. But like he doesn't know because it's himself, so he doesn't see it happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it must be some sort of like weird illusion because you would think you would see your hands. You know what I mean? It must
Yeah.
be like
Yeah.
only visible like to the Fae or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a novella. Yeah, I'm sure
I
it would have
know.
been explained more in like a longer book, but
I
it was
know.
explained enough that it was
Yeah, yeah,
satisfying.
yeah. I mean, I always tend to be, I guess, ask a lot of questions because I'm always like, well, wait a minute. Where did the curse come from? Why were they
Yeah.
cursed? How long has this been going on? What is it exactly that you feel? And like the Fae, when they're attacking, like I get all these questions, but I'm like, it's a novella. They don't have time to explain all these things. And I will say, for it being so short of a book, I feel like she did such a good job setting up the world that there wasn't a lot of extra explaining the Fae versus the humans and like what all that was. Like you just kind of like got it really quickly. And like you said earlier with like how desperate everybody was, you felt that really fast without her explaining like this big long history of why that was. Like there wasn't a lot of exposition. You just kind of understood things really fast, which I feel like is really hard to do, especially in a
Yeah.
novella. So like props to
Yeah.
her because that went she did it really well.
Yeah. Because I think there was such a focus on emotion throughout
Mhm.
the entire book, which I think you have to do
Yeah.
because you can't rely on exposition
Mhm.
or just, different plot incidences because
Yeah.
in a longer book you would have a scene that shows, a small incident that
Mhm.
kind of shows you the bigger picture that's what's going
Yeah.
on, but like there wasn't room in that, so you just had to get it through the feelings.
Mm.
And we knew how these people felt, so that kind of explained to us like how long they were fighting without her even saying that. I
Yeah.
mean, she did say that,
Yeah.
but it was more the emotions that told the story, which is that was probably another reason why I liked it so much,
Mm.
because it's hard to do. And I read a lot of books and I don't think all of them like have that. At least, different people are different at other things, but I think not every author is like that skilled at portraying
Yes.
emotion across the
Yes.
page, or not every book comes out because I mean the author might be skilled, but sometimes one book just doesn't really work.
Mhm. Yeah.
um and like I said, other people have different strengths. I mean, some people's
Yeah.
strengths are like a really intricate plot or world building or whatever,
Mhm.
but this one I think showed off like a really really strong skill in
Mhm.
conveying emotion.
Mhm.
And that's, I don't want to say it's rare, but it probably is,
It
because
is.
somebody to be really, really good at that thing,
Mhm.
there's not going to be a lot of people who are really, really good at one
Yeah.
thing. You kind of
Yeah.
get like the top of the top,
Yeah.
and everyone's trying to get there, but
Yeah.
like,
Well, and I feel like usually everybody has a different skill set. So like some
hmm
people might be really, really good at writing um really quippy stories or really funny stories. And then some people
yeah,
are really good at writing in a lot of romance and making it feel natural. But
hmm
like this book to me, I could just describe it as show don't tell. Like that's what it
hmm
felt like, was her just showing all this stuff without having to tell you anything. And that's one I've always, because I always
yeah.
tend to over explain. So I really appreciated that with her storytelling. Like that is definitely a talent.
Yeah, I feel like I want to read it again and learn more,
Mm.
because it was very evocative. Because I'm
Yeah.
not even talking about like just character emotions, but there was just mood, like
Hmm.
mood came across really
Very.
well. I mean, you just kind of felt like you were there.
Yeah.
So atmosphere, mood,
Hmm.
emotions, everything was very vibrant. And yeah, definitely a book that I probably want to read again and kind of study, because I
Mm.
would love. I remember finishing it and being like, oh man, if I could write something like this, like,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that's, if you're listening to this and you haven't read it and now you just got a bunch of spoilers, but if you don't care about that, this is definitely a book to read if you really want to work on being very evocative with your
Mm.
writing and making things really alive.
Yeah.
Um, I definitely recommend this one.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Yeah. And I think her storytelling style works really well with this particular like genre of fantasy, because like you said, we read fantasy but we read different. Like I read mostly like snarky fantasy, that's like
Yeah,
fantasy romance that's a little bit like faster,
like it's funny.
snarky, funny, like there's depth to it but it's more upbeat. I've never loved tragic stories. they just make me sad. So I don't like Les Mis and stuff like that. Like I can't stand them because they just make me sad. I'm like, I don't want to feel sad. But this like really deep kind of story that it almost had like a Game of Thrones vibe for me.
It did.
Like it wasn't like evil, but just like
Yeah.
the intensity behind the story and like the feeling behind it is what reminded me of that. So I think if that's the kind of genre you're telling, this type of storytelling, like the way she tells the story works really well for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what surprised me because I just was not expecting in a novella to
Mm-hmm.
find that kind of like weighty. I mean, you don't really see that kind of fantasy unless it's like epic fantasy,
Yeah, very
you
true.
know, like really weighty. So I think the fact that it was a novella, I
Mhm.
was like, wait, you can do this in a novella?
Yeah.
Really? Like
Yeah.
what? But she did it. She did it
Yeah.
great. I mean, I
Mhm.
was surprised. And like I said, I think that shows a lot of skill because I don't think it's very easy to
Mhm.
do an epic fantasy basically in a
Yeah.
novella. I mean,
Yeah.
like,
Nobody does that.
mm-mm.
Like ever. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. You have any other thoughts about this book?
Um no, other than now I'm curious what the other novellas in the series are like and like how this one overlaps with them. Like does it have any overlapping characters or is it the setting? Because I haven't read the other one, so I don't know, but I'm curious now.
Yeah, I'm curious too because I'm wondering if they're all this kind of tone or if
Mm.
that's and the other thing I'm really curious about too is more of Sarah K.L. Wilson's books because I've been
Mhm.
eyeing I think Fly with the Arrow, that series she
Yeah,
has
yeah. Mhm.
for forever. And I still haven't read it, but this makes me want to read more of her other books to see if
Yeah.
she writes this way in all of them because I really
Mhm.
enjoyed it. But also I'm curious, like, do the other authors also write like, you know, very kind of like
Yeah.
weighty, or do they have their own different styles? And maybe some of
Mhm.
them are more like the kind of thing I was expecting.
Yeah.
So I am definitely eager to check
Mhm.
out like the rest of the series and also Sarah K.L. Wilson's other books.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but she's written a lot, so I'm sure she has like a variety of different tones too.
Yeah.
Because I think she's written a lot.
I think she
Like,
has. I've seen a lot of things like advertised by her. Yeah.
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 Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, that's another reason I did not feel bad about my writing after reading this, like, to me, masterpiece. Because, like,
Mhm.
personally for me, this is what I enjoy. So to me, I would
Yes.
say it's a
Yeah, yeah.
masterpiece. Like, I didn't feel bad because I'm like, I know, I mean, this author has put in the work. Like, she has written so many
Mhm.
books,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm like, I wasn't even thinking about comparing myself to her just because I'm like, I have not written that many books. Like,
Yeah.
there's no point. you know.
Well, and I mean, I think any author can attest to the fact that the more time that goes by, the better you get.
hmm
And the more you
Yeah.
figure out like how you like to tell a story and what your strengths are and
Exactly.
what things you need to work on and like, I don't think anybody ever gets to a place where they finally feel like they're exactly the way they want to be.
Mm-mm.
But definitely having written a ton of books definitely helps get you where you're going toward. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. And also reading too, because reading can help
Mhm.
you kind of decide what kind of stories you want to tell.
Yes.
I mean, you do have to write and practice and see what you like writing, but I think taking note of what you really
Mm.
like reading. And there's a difference between I started doing this with like my ratings on Goodreads. I started differentiating between books that I feel like were written for me, like my absolute favorites.
Yeah.
I love this kind of story. Like those for me are my 5-star reads. And then 4-star are books because there's so many other books that like I really liked, but they're
Yeah.
not necessarily like my go-to genre. Like for this one,
Yeah.
it's clear it was a 5-star for me, but like if you were using my same categories, Rachel, you would probably rate it more 4 stars. It's like it was
Yeah.
enjoyable, but it
Mhm.
wasn't not like your absolute favorite be all end all kind of
Yeah.
book, you know?
Like it was very well done, but I really was not the target reader for it, which is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think taking note of what books like make you feel like that, like, oh my goodness, this person was writing for me in mind. And seeing like what the similarities between them are is really helpful for deciding
Yes.
what you want to write because you should probably write something that is like
Mhm.
that because if you write something that you enjoy reading, like I enjoy contemporary romance, but like I don't absolutely love
Yeah.
it. And so if I try and write a book where I'm like spending 6 months drafting and then another 6 months editing, and I
Yeah.
mean, like you don't have the passion
Yeah.
to do that with.
Mhm.
So that's something I'm taking more careful note of, is like the books that I really love, and trying to see with my own writing, okay, is this similar? And if it's
Mm.
not, maybe that's why I'm struggling. Maybe that's why
Yeah.
I hate this story. Maybe I need to write something more like
Yeah.
these books that I really, really love. And then
Yeah.
maybe that will get me all that passion and,
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I know we're like kind of on a ramble now, but I'm like, I totally agree. Because I mean, that's why I kind of switched the style of writing that I was doing, was because I realized I was like, I think, not that I don't love my first books, I do, but I think I felt more of like a pressure to be like a traditionally published author, where they
Mhm.
publish, these big epic books with these big long stories and these big ensemble casts. Like I felt like I should write that, but I don't know that that's ever what I really wanted to write, because that's not what I read. Like I read
Yeah.
K.M. Shea and Sherry L. Tapscott. Like I started realizing that I read the same types of books all the time. Those are my favorite. I'm like, why am I not writing this? That
Yeah.
would be so much more fun for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I had the same kind of realization too. Rachel and I have talked about this, but I was just hating my second draft and I couldn't figure out why. And then I went to the library and I was just kind of browsing and I was like, I'm just gonna pick up and whatever like hooks me, I'll get. And there's all these books that were, well-known titles that had been on my list for a while, but I picked them up and the main character is like a spy or an assassin. I was like,
Mm,
I'm just not in the mood for that, because I'll read those books and I enjoy them,
yeah.
but they're not like my favorite.
Yeah.
And so I got, sort of quieter books that I liked, and I brought that home from the library. And then the next day, it was Monday, and I sat down and I realized, wait a minute, like half your plot is this spy
Yeah.
assassin like stuff. Like no wonder you're
Yeah.
struggling writing this. Like you wouldn't pick this up out of a library to read it.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you
Mhm.
doing? Which sounds, I don't know. I'm sure there are people listening to this like, how did you not realize that before? But like sometimes you really, I mean,
Mhm.
you're so in your own head and you just,
Yeah.
and I think I was trying to write, because this book started as my Kindle Vella. So I
Mm,
wanted it to be really interesting. And to make it interesting, I
mm,
just threw in all this exciting stuff.
yeah.
And just because something is exciting doesn't necessarily mean that it'll make you excited. Because I
Yeah.
mean, Louisa May Alcott wrote about literally nothing exciting. I mean,
Yeah.
she wrote about four girls who live at home and then one of them travels abroad, but like nothing really happens. Like
Yeah.
nobody goes to war. The father
Yeah.
does, but like none of them go to war. Like nothing really happens except they're at
Yeah.
home, and Beth has to work up the courage to go play the piano at her neighbor's house, which, by the way,
Mhm.
I totally get the fear of going to play the piano at a stranger's house. Oh my goodness. Like, so I guess for me, that's high stakes. I guess I'm Beth. I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, you can write about anything. You can write about making tea in the morning and make it exciting.
Yeah.
So just thinking that I need to have spies and assassins in a book doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
It's the way you write it that
Mhm.
makes it exciting. And I think the only way you can write something and make it exciting is if you really love it.
Yeah.
You know, so you can write about super exciting things like spies and
Mhm.
assassins, but if it doesn't make you excited, it's going to be boring. Like
Yeah.
people are going to be reading about boring spies and
Yes.
boring assassins. And you don't want that. So just
Mhm.
write about the cup of tea. And if you like that, then it will be exciting,
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think I remember I had asked somebody, I think it might have been Emma St. Clair, in some kind of Zoom thing, why I wasn't getting very much traction on my first book. And she was like, well, as long as it's been out, she's like, it could be a couple of things. It could be there's not enough eyes on it. She's like, or it could be that's not resonating with people. And I was like,
Mm,
hmm. And I was like, I realize now that I think the reason it wasn't resonating was because it didn't resonate with me when I was writing it. Like there are parts of it that
yeah.
did. I love that story. No shame on that story. But I think if the story doesn't resonate with you, readers feel that. And like I was talking to somebody the other day that even in this new series I'm working on, the main character, she's very different from me, but she's also similar in so many ways. And like I feel like I'm writing the same character over and over again, just like a little bit different every time. But I felt kind of bad at first but I'm like, you know what? I think that actually makes sense because that's who I am. So why wouldn't I write that? Versus for me to write someone like the girl in this book would not be at all authentic because that's not me. I would have have such a hard time writing it, and B, I don't think it would come across authentic because it's not. So I think it's important to figure out what feels authentic to you, and that's what you should write. Like if the simplicity is authentic to you, then write that. If big complicated Game of Thrones things are, authentic to you, then write that. But like trying to write what you think you should write never really works.
No, I agree. And I think as authors, we put so much pressure on ourselves to do something different. I mean, I think in anything, I mean, I know I feel like that on Instagram a lot too. I need to do something different, but that is kind of a trick mindset because the thing is, readers like what they like. So I'm thinking I brought up Betty Neals, whose heroines are always either like a kind of a Cinderella doormat type or they're like a super awkward like horse girl type. And that's, and they are all like that. But I like those kind. So I keep reading her books because that's what I like. And I think we're like, oh, I can't write this because it's too much the same as the last book I wrote. But, it's probably because the imagination is a funny thing. It's probably going to be different enough because just our imaginations work like that. I mean, it'd be very hard to write the same book. Honestly, I think it'd be harder to write something super, super similar. It's going to turn out different. And in the ways that it's the same, I mean, readers probably love that about your books. And if you tried to do something different, they probably wouldn't like it as much. So, it's definitely not something to worry about, even though it's always in my head. I think it's in everybody's head. I think everybody struggles with this.
Yes.
But,
and now that you say that, it kind of like like analogy to top of my head. And I'm like, it's kind of like if you choose fast food to eat for dinner, it's because you know what you're getting and you like it. So if I drove up to McDonald's and ordered like a large fry and a burger and they gave me a taco, I'd be so mad. I'd be like, I wanted the dependability of my large fry and my burger. So like, I think not that you can't change, but like, I think people do like the dependability of, I know what I'm getting here. I know I like this formula. So please continue using it.
Yeah, and that's why you went there in the first place. Had you wanted, I mean, maybe you eat a burger every day of your life, and one day you're like, you know what? I'm going to branch out. I'm going to get a taco. So you go to the taco restaurant, but you went to McDonald's and you expected McDonald's. So if somebody goes to Rachel E. Scott and they're like, I want to read a Rachel E. Scott book, that's what I'm in the mood for. And all of a sudden, Rachel throws us Lord of the Rings, like, nobody's gonna be happy because if they wanted Lord of the Rings, they would have gone to Tolkien. Like,
exactly. Yeah. Wow, this chat really went off the rails.
I know, but I don't know. I mean, I think it's kind of good because people are always saying, as a writer, you should read a lot and learn from it. So I feel like, we went into the book chat just talking about the book. And I feel like I don't really like take notes or really, I read to enjoy, but this is making me realize that I guess I do kind of internalize a lot of what I'm learning anyway, which is good to know. Even if I'm not consciously thinking about it, I guess I am learning from my reading. It's good. Yay.
I agree. These conversations are always interesting, but it's interesting now that we've read the same book. Like this is a different kind of chat, so it's been really fun to see the different perspectives and
And speaking of which, should we do another buddy read book chat book club thing? I mean, I'll let you guys answer us in the comments or you can message us on Instagram, but just the two of us, what do we think?
I would be down. Sure.
Me too. Because I know Rachel and there was a free book giveaway it was like a bunch of books all in one post. And that's where we got married by war. And I think there's 6 other books that we picked up from that post?
Like
and that. I shared it on Instagram and hopefully most people who are interested were able to snag these free copies. when I shared it, because I thought, well, if we all get the same free book, Rachel
Yeah.
and I and everybody who's interested on Instagram or watches the show, but that being said, now that we've read it, I would, if you were like me and you like the same kind of books I do, even if you didn't get Married by War for free, you should buy it. Like, it's worth the money. If that's not really your thing, well, now you know. Maybe you don't want to spend money on it,
Yeah.
but like,
I will say,
Yeah.
even though it wasn't like my thing, it still was very well written. And I clearly, like, after this discussion, we know this, but like, I still got a lot of enjoyment out of it, even though it's not like a book where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to reread this 7 times now,
yeah. Yeah. So we'll probably maybe pick another book from that same post. So if you guys were able to get those books, it'll probably be one of those. But Rachel and I also both did what is it? Romance Bookworms? What is that thing called?
I cannot remember for the life of me.
Well, if anybody's familiar with it, you know what I'm talking about. It's where every quarter they have it's a website, and they've got a whole bunch of free books. And Rachel and I just did this quarter. I think the next one is in December. And we've got a bunch of books, so we might have some more books in common. So I'm sure we'll pick another one. And we'll continue doing them, but let us know too. I mean, we definitely want to keep doing them, but it would be nice to know what your thoughts are on about it. If there's something else you want us to talk about, if we do another one, maybe we didn't go in depth with a certain area that you wanted us to. So yeah, just let us know.
Yeah.
And we will let you know when we're doing another Buddy Read Book Club book chat, so you can join along.
Yeah. Yep, it should be fun. We'll see what book we decide to do next.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Oh my goodness. Books and friends, like, is there anything better?
No.
It's not.
Easy question.
Yeah. Okay, well, we will see you guys next time.
Thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed it, and tune in next week for another episode. And if you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a review so that other people can find us, and we will see you in the future. Bye.